see what we got. Minus 18 here. I'm just leaving my dad's. I just wanted to show you guys the natural beauty of all the snow here. Got it just weighing down all the trees. I mean, it is just beyond beautiful, though. It really is. Oh, there's my son's little cabin. So I have some things to share with you guys, but I just wanted to give you a little sample of what it looks like here with all the heavy snowfall we've had on these branches. Trust me, the electric companies have some fun when this kind of stuff happens, because these weighted down trees, as you can see, the power lines are in close proximity. But so far, no issues. But here's the driveway in. It is just beautiful. Bitter fucking cold, but beautiful. It is we're near Jim Creek. We're over towards the Knik Glacier. Over by my house it's 10 above, and over here it's 18 below. So things vary drastically. Very drastically. I'll be back with you guys here shortly. I have an encounter from Oscar on the Copper River to share with you guys. Pretty damn creepy stuff. And catch you here in just a sec. Hey, thanks for joining me today. What I wanted to share with you comes from Oscar. Where this happened was along the Copper River, approximately about 10 years ago. So Oscar had raised in the area, grew up in the area, was back visiting family, and while he was visiting, one of his aunties asked him to collect some basically to go collect some fireweeds. She was doing something or another and wanted the flowers for something. So he takes off, brings a .357 pistol with him, and goes hiking along the trail that was just adjacent to the river. It was actually a smaller river that immediately flows right into the Copper River. He left specifics out because his family still lives there, and how recent activity is still going on. He doesn't want anyone rushing to the area. So anyway, he's hiking along, and as he's hiking along, to his left hand side is the river, and to his right hand side is a bunch of tall grass, some fireweed, and a tree line approximately about 60 yards off. But that 60 yards off varies because it kind of ebbs and flows back and forth, closer to the riverbank, further away, and so on. So he's walking along, and he's not all that far from where his aunt and other relatives are at. He's roughly a quarter mile away. Now, as he's going along, out of the corner of his eye, he notices brown hopping in the grass, roughly about 30-40 yards off, about half the distance between him and the tree line. And it caught his attention, so immediately he's thinking, oh shit, there's a bear stalking me. So he pulls out the pistol and starts yelling, hey bear, bear, hey bear, bear. And he noticed it's still just sees brown, what he assumed was fur at first, hopping just above the grass height. And he was really confused because he never seen a bear move like that. So immediately he thought, compromised bear, even more dangerous. This bear must be injured. Maybe it's got a trap on its paw and that's why it's hopping. He was equating it to that. So he decides, well shit, it doesn't look too big. Let me go and find out exactly what's going on with this thing. So, against his better judgment, he wanted to make sure, because it's so close to his family and relatives with elders, if it was a smaller bear that was wounded, needed to be put down, he could dispatch it or attempt to with the .357 and kind of end any danger. At least that's his initial thoughts. That all changes rather quickly. As he starts going towards this thing in the last direction he's seen it hopping, he realized about 10 yards in, I shouldn't be going after a wounded bear with just this .357. I should probably have a larger caliber gun. So he stops, he retreats out of there. He's looking around, doesn't notice the brown hopping anymore, but it's really, really quiet. He decides, I'm gonna go get my uncle's shotgun, come back with a shotgun. Maybe my uncle can come with me, and we can, you know, 4 eyes are better than 2, find this bear, put it down, chase it off, whatever. So he goes, rounds up his uncle. His uncle begrudgingly came along with, understood why, you know, his nephew was asking him to come along, say, you know, in case of a bear. So his uncle has a shotgun, he has a .357. They go back to where he last saw the hopping, and they start walking towards the tree line looking for sign of this thing. They saw some grass laid over, they saw what appeared to be a path going towards the tree, so they take it. It looked fresh, you know, freshly broken grass, you know, split apart, you know, obvious trail through there. And not a game trail, just so happened they could tell the direction of travel. So as they're going along, they come into an area just before the tree line where it kind of clears out a little bit, and there's a little bit of a muddy patch. And he's noticing the tracks are one in front of the other directly and about 4.5 feet apart. And they're not bear tracks, they're bear footprint tracks. And immediately he stops. His uncle bumps into him because his uncle's staring down trying to make out a partial track that he just saw. So he's like, you know, hey, watch out, look at these. He points at the tracks, and his uncle goes, you know, Jakaya, you know, hairy man, monster. Oscar's like, come on, you know, whatever. It's obviously a double step from a bear. Let's continue on. His uncle immediately shuts him down, says, no, we're not going any further. He argues with his uncle a little bit. His uncle is an elder, you know, in his mid-late 60s at this point, and tells Oscar gently but firmly, we're not continuing any further. We're going to back out of here, and we're going back and just leave this alone. It's obviously moved away, and let's leave it be. As they're having this discussion, they are right up almost to the tree line, so they're about 60 yards from that trail, the main trail that they were on. And where they were, it was kind of like a big half moon shaped kind of, like I said, it ebbs and flows in distance between the tree line and the riverbank. So it's kind of like a big quasi horseshoe half moon kind of cup kind of shape in this tree line. Behind them, back towards the cabin, they hear this real sharp piercing whistle. I mean, he said it was almost to the point of felt like his ears were gonna bleed. It was so intense, high pitched and loud, just so loud. And they immediately whip around, both of them pointing guns that direction, trying to figure out what the hell was that. His uncle said, I told you we need to go. Let's sidestep over to the trail and get gone. So as they're doing so, they're still looking the direction of the sharp whistle, the direction it came from. Now, as they're going along, they're sidestepping. They're not necessarily paying attention as far as, you know, off their peripherals. They're focused on the direction that they still have to go by that way on that trail. Keep that in mind. As they get just back over to that main trail, Oscar said there was a return sharp whistle from immediately that trail they were just following, like just off behind them on their left. Same intensity, little bit different pitch, but same intensity, same length. And immediately they turn and their focus goes that direction. All they see is a single spruce tree just kind of shaking. The rest of the trees are dead still. No other sound going on except this one tree just kind of wiggling. Immediately his uncle says, we really need to pick up our pace, but don't run, and let's go. They're continuing back down this trail, and again, like I said, it's kind of half moon shaped, so that tree line comes up to about within 20-25 yards of the trail, a little further back the direction they came. As they're getting to that point, another sharp whistle comes from the direction of the tracks where they saw the tracks turn around, what have you. It gets their attention because it was, again, very loud, crisp, very intense. They both look back and see a dark figure standing between two trees. This thing's kind of doing this number, holding on to two spruce trees, just kind of shaking them. And they seen it lift its head and make that whistle again. When it lifted its head, he said, it almost looked like the jaw widened. From his perspective, it looked like his jaw widened out or something. Again, it could have just, you know, been an optical thing, but that's what stood out to him when he saw that. Lets out that second whistle, and they watch it do it, and immediately off to their right inside the trees, off to the right hand side, a return whistle. And the return whistle was directed at them, not the one across the way. So immediately the focus changed again. They're right off onto their right, pointing guns that direction. They're trying to figure. Uncle starts yelling, "Go away, you know, we got nothing for you, you gotta leave." Not a sound. Just not a sound. Dead quiet. He said he doesn't even remember hearing the river directly behind them. They were roughly not even 10 yards off the river. So as they're standing there, he said it kind of felt like a standoff because they weren't moving anymore and there wasn't no sound. I don't mean to giggle. He used a term. He said he was prairie dogging. Anyway, so as they were standing there and he's trying to collect himself, the thing that stood out the most was how dead quiet it was. His uncle kind of took a step back, kind of bumped into Oscar a little bit, and then kind of nudged him with his elbow and points. And when he points, Oscar sees what he's pointing at. He sees that same brown color he saw earlier right inside the trees, doing this, looking like something hopping around, right? And immediately they're both puzzled, and they're trying to figure out what are we, is that a bear? You know, because again, it looked like a bear on all fours, just kind of, but it wasn't shaped the same. That's why they're thrown off, but it was very similar in coloration. And as they're staring at it, sharp whistle comes from back over in that direction of that trail they were following. So as soon as he hears that whistle, his uncle backs up one more step, bumps into Oscar harder, reaches back without looking and grabs a hold of Oscar's coat and starts dragging him off to their right, sidestepping down the trail. As they do so, there's a little bit of a dog leg in the trail for whatever reason. There was no reason for it. It just so happened to be a little bit of a dog leg in the trail. Well, his uncle went 2-step just through it. You know, it was only grass. You know, there wasn't no obstacles or anything. For whatever reason, the trail was just that way. As his uncle does that, he trips and falls over. Now, immediately, Oscar's attention is down on his uncle. His uncle is elderly. He wanted to make sure he didn't break a hip and all that kind of stuff. Helps his uncle up. In the meantime, they're hearing noises off in the distance, but he's not watching because he's trying to help his uncle. As they're hearing these noises, he gets his uncle up. Their attention is towards the direction of the noises, and his uncle asks him, "Are you hearing that?" And he goes, "Yes, it sounds like it's, you know, just right over here in the trees." Now, these trees are pretty dense undergrowth. This was roughly late fall, and it was pretty thick in there. They couldn't necessarily see anything in there, especially up to about 6 feet up, because of all the undergrowth and vegetation. It was about 6 foot high, and then the spruce and a couple birch or whatever was coming out behind it. As they're looking that direction, they can still hear the noises being made. He said it sounded like scurrying of a large animal, like a just kind of scurrying around. He said the leaves had just started falling, but not all of them. Some were still on the trees. Now, when he was looking, his uncle kept nudging him, and he thought his uncle was just trying to get his attention to pay attention to the noise. So he's basically ignoring his uncle's little elbows. As he's doing so, all of a sudden his uncle like whispers in his ear, "Look over to the right, over to the right." So Oscar, he gets his attention, he looks over to the right, and he said what was standing there was almost about 11 foot tall. He came back and measured the tree that it was standing next to, and that's where he came up with that number. 11 foot tall. He said it wasn't overly huge in the shoulders. He said it was kind of slender, kind of slim. Had a brownish, orangish brown kind of color to it, but it wasn't the same color brown that they saw with the little hopping motion. Looking at this thing, he said it was partially silhouetted, so they didn't get any face details, except they could tell it had a nose that was flattened down, like flat to the face. The eyes just looked like big dark sockets. The hair, he said, was 6 to 8 inches along the head, and like what shoulders it had, as far as basically head down to shoulders. It basically had no neck. And he said that the way it was kind of swaying back and forth, he said it was very intimidating, and they were transfixed on this, right? As they're staring at this thing, Oscar gets the creeps, and his attention is drawn back off to his left. When he looks over to his left, he sees a smaller one, and as he looks over at it, it ducks down right behind the brush that's roughly about 6 foot tall. He hears crashing and snapping, and immediately points the gun that direction, because it sounds like it's coming at him, but in actuality it was quartering kind of back towards this other one off to their right. He's focusing his gun, following it. It's in the grass now, and it's still doing this little hopping thing. It looked like hopping, and as it got up closer to the other one, it stood up. And when it stood up, he said it was just under the shoulder as far as height. And when that one turned around and looked back at them, had really big eyes, same type of nose, said that it was weird around the jaw. The jaw looked extra wide, almost like it shouldn't be. And he said that really stood out. It had the grizzled brown kind of hair like a bear or a moose, and they both, looking at him and his uncle, turned and quartered away back into the trees. Not too far from the back side of this tree line, Oscar's well aware of the terrain. It goes and starts going up into the hills and into the mountains. As they're sitting there, like, getting the grips of what's going on, his uncle said, "That's not the first time I've seen these two. It's the first time I've seen them this year. I saw them once before, 3 years prior." They leave the area. They get back to the cabin, and immediately Oscar's all over his uncle. "What happened when you saw them last?" He said the smaller one was about half as tall and had been doing something very similar to what Oscar had saw with this little hopping motion. But when his uncle saw it, it was in the open, and it was doing this galloping thing, kind of half running, half galloping, doing this. It was kind of a quasi hop to its run, and it was just going back and forth. He said when he saw that one initially, it was doing that, and he saw the second one standing in the trees staring at him, and he left. And that was a few years before that went down. So that's why Oscar didn't want to share the exact location. He said it's ongoing, and had given me an invitation, but I can't make it down that way right now. It just winter time and all this shit, it's just a bit much. But I will take him up on that in the near future, maybe after a couple of excursions this spring. But Oscar, thanks for being patient with me getting back to you. We've had a hell of a lot of snow and some wicked temperatures, so I appreciate your patience, and I will catch you guys on the next one.